college supported this agenda of cultural eradication in both word and deed. Turning honesty toward that shameful past innovates this acknowledgement and gives orientation to our desire for a reconciled future. Accordingly, this living land acknowledgement is intentionally incomplete, a reflection of the ongoing process it represents to learn respectfully from the stories of this land and the people that carry them, to think reflectively about the injustice in our shared past, and to act responsibly with that knowledge today to inspire a more equitable tomorrow. On behalf of the Clark Forum, Dickinson College, the Women's and Gender Resource Center, the Middle East Studies Program, and the Department of Africana Studies, and the Leadership in the Age of Uncertainty series, I would like to welcome you to tonight's event, Breaking Barriers, a journey of empowering women through self-discovery, equality, and resilience. When I read Al-Sheikh's book, Through Tragedy and Triumph, I was struck by her resilience in the face of the hardships she experienced. One part of the book that was particularly meaningful to me was her experiences as a single mother. I was moved by her dedication to her daughters and was reminded of the love and resilience of my own mom when she became a single parent to me and my two sisters. Al-Sheikh's strength in the face of incredible adversity truly stunned me and reminded me of the importance and gift that it is to have strong women as role models in our lives. Hagir Al-Sheikh is an entrepreneur, CEO, chairwoman, talk show host, philanthropist, and author. She is the founder of HSC Staffing Agency and Tomorrow Smiling, where she advocates for women's rights, as well as the host of The Hagir Show and the co-host of TSO Live Talk Show. In 2019, she published her memoir, Through Tragedy and Triumph, A Life Well Traveled. Al-Sheikh was recognized for her work as an activist on human rights, domestic violence, and immigration advocacy as a woman of influence by Central Penn Business Journal in 2017, and was a recipient of a Healthcare Hero Award in 2017. She has received many other awards from entities such as Harrisburg Area Community College, Grand Canyon University, the state of Pennsylvania, and others. There will be a question and answer session immediately following the program, so please hold all questions until that time. The Clark Forum welcomes differences of opinion expressed politely, thoughtfully, and succinctly. Disruptive behavior or harassment of speakers, members of the Dickinson community, or audience members will not be tolerated. As a show of respect for our speaker and everyone in attendance, please stay until the end of the program, including the question and answer session. There will be a book sale and signing immediately following the program. At this time, I ask that you please silence all cell phones and other devices. In the event of an emergency, accessible exits are located through the double doors behind you and to the right at the end of the hallway. And now, please join me in welcoming Hagir Al-Sheikh.
Thank you. Thank you guys for having me, and thank you for having an interest in knowing about Sudan and a little bit about my journey. We don't have enough time to talk about everything that I experienced or went through, so I hope that what I give you will just allow you to go and do your own research and learn more about not just the war in Sudan, but anywhere that needs our attention and our care. As a 15 years old girl who weighed less than 8 pounds, I found myself hung from a tree in a ghost house. The ghost house is a name that activists in Sudan gave to a place where they take activists. It's an unknown place. That's where ghost house came from. I was hung from a branch, beaten for 10 hours continuously. When one man stopped beating me, the second one will take his place. The torture continued for 10 hours. At some point of any prolonged torture, you feel numb. I was smelling my own blood, and I didn't know how this will end. close to sunrise, they picked me up, threw me in the back of a pickup truck, and hauled me to my house. And when we got to the front door, two of them reached to the back and threw me like a bag of trash, or a trash bag. I don't remember, or I didn't remember anything after that, but hearing my father's voice, every inch of my body from my head to my heels were hurting, and I wasn't able to move my body. At that point, you know, you probably, before I keep moving, you probably were thinking like, why were you there? Why were you at the ghost house or being detained or tortured? This for me only started when I was 12 years old. A rogue military coup overthrew our democratic government in Sudan, and life changed after the coup. The government began silencing their people and guaranteeing their continued existence by violence and by forcing people and by torturing them. So many people start to leave the country and find refuge somewhere else. I became more involved during my high school and my college. My activism grew during my college. I started to help organizing and participate in rallies and protesting, and it's peaceful protests. If you guys watched the Sudanese revolution, I became one of few female spokesperson for the Democratic Forefront, which is similar to the Democratic Party here. And as you can imagine, in that region, being a woman is a problem itself. But being a woman who wants her rights or talk about women's rights, my political action and my choices had consequences. They were not without a cost, and I paid dearly in the form of torture, physical torture, mental, sexual harassment. I was often detained, beaten, whipped with anything they could find, wood, metal, anything, you name it. I'm not sure if you can see, I have a scar in my head that happened during college, and I can't tell you everything that had happened, but I hope you can get like a glimpse of a picture of the situation back in the 1990s and during my time. The government became more comfortable after that, because everywhere else there is silence, and when there is no accountability, people tend to feel they can do whatever they want. They start to, the level of the violence start to increase, more rights were taken. So that's the situation back then, but unfortunately, that was not just my case or few women. That's basically every woman that I knew before me or after me who tried to speak up and criticize or try to make a difference. They faced the criticism not just from the government, but from the society at large. The society perceived politically active women in Sudan, and I'm sure anywhere else in the world we can all relate to that, as a threat to authoritarianism, a threat to their agenda. So that's why we see in Sudan, for example, the use of rape, sexual harassment, and targeting women, not just during the current war or the revolution before that, but throughout Sudan history. The history is full, Sudan history is full of coup, is full of dictatorship. From 1956, when Sudan gained its independence, up to today, they only had 11 years of peace, and that's not consecutive, like it's just here and there. So I cannot truly or possibly summarize Sudan history of war, genocide, ethnic cleansing, human rights violation, terrorism, and 35 plus years of dictatorship in this short time. But like I said earlier, I hope all of you, if you don't know what is happening in Sudan currently, to search it, know the history, and spread awareness about Sudan. Sudan was a colony of the British Empire. Even when Sudan achieved the independence from Great Britain in 1956, civil war was already brewing between the North and the South. Mainly the North is dominated by mix between Arab and African. You can tell because the color, the complexion from the North. Funny thing, I'm considered white in Sudan. The south you go, the darker complexion, so that created the same racism, injustice. You think this only exists in the US or somewhere, in Europe, but it's also in Africa. They're all African, you all have similar colors, complexion, but you lived a different life. So the way they were treating the people in the South, and also what happened is when Great Britain was occupying Sudan, they introduced Christianity and different religions. So the North was mainly dominated by Muslim, the South was Christian. So the war made to look like it's a religious or just cultural, but it's more than that. It's greed, the oil, and there's more than one reason for the war back then. There is another army coup that happened in 1958 and 1969. So they have a period of coup, a small couple months of democracy, then another coup. Military, occupant, then a small amount of democracy. So you get to feel and live through democracy for a short period of time. Then the Civil War sparked in 1983. And part of the reason that they were giving is because of the military regime trying to impose Sharia law in the area and trying to Islamicize Sudan. But during that time, Sudan had Christian, Jew, Muslim, different religion, different culture. They were living together before the 1983 Sharia law. So beginning of 1983, Sudan People Liberation, or SPLA, led insurrection in the south, a region dominated by animists and Christians. And in 1989, al-Bashir, the dictatorship, took over, and he was a religious and extremely military leader. He led a successful coup and became the chief of state, the prime minister, and the chief of the armed force. Took all the control. They created a militia to protect him, and the militia is the Janjaweed that is responsible for the genocide in Darfur and the crime, war crime in the Nuba Mountain, a different part in Sudan. From that day, women, specifically activists, became a target of systemic oppression. Sudan government imposed a penal code in 1991. That code called Public Order Act, which gave control over what women wear, whom they spoke to and saw, and any job they might hold, with any perceived offender facing punishment by flogging or, in rare cases, stoning, amputation, even execution as a punishment. That's in 1991, and I lived during that time. It wasn't a good time. But in early 2003, the Sudanese government enlisted the Janjaweed and trained them to kill people and do it was an ethnic cleansing and a genocide. The government planes will come and bomb the villages. And after they leave, the Janjaweed, they would come in the horses or camel and rape, murder civilians, abducting women, held them in inhumane, degrading slavery-like condition, and human trafficked. Most of them got forcibly married or held for ransom. And that is still up to today. The effect of the genocide and war in Darfur has been severe, displacing millions of people. And I believe before this current war, it was over 300,000 people died during that genocide, and several million lead the country to a neighboring country, Chad or another. Darfur, if you can imagine, it's a quarter size of Texas, the state of Texas. People were fighting for resources. There's lack of resources. And it didn't help that the only way out was either walking to neighboring country or risk being killed, raped, or tortured. The area has particularly got affected with violence, like I said, it's ethnic cleansing, genocide. All that led to mass displacement and severe shortages of essentials. With all that happening, the economy is definitely going to get affected. Although the area is rich in herbal land and oil reserve, there is struggle due to the conflict. International sanction. Up to recently, Sudan name was removed from sanction from the US, and that attracted foreign investment. China, Russia, for an example, on Western companies. After a while, they withdrew due to human rights concerns. So even the small amount of help that was there is not available or was not available. And that led to further instability in the country, economy in general. But as we all know, for every action, there is a reaction, and the reaction to everything what's happening in Sudan is the people of Sudan said enough. They started the revolution. Sporadic protests started happening in 2011 and 2013. That was faced by extreme violence from the government. They don't want to give up the power. They start shooting people. The guns and the tear gas and everything that was given to them was made available courtesy of a couple countries. They embedded into the Sudan politics, UAE, Saudi, China, Russia, and we also participated in that. There is guns that was fueled by the US as well. The people started to think this is not going to succeed. So the revolution stopped in 2013. We lost many young lives for that. But then life continued to get bad, and people did not have another option. You are going to die either ways. So they took the street again in 2018, and they were faced by the same violence. In 2019, they resumed the protesting, and they did not go back home. People were taking the street, and I'm sure many of you know about the Arab Spring, and if you follow the Sudan Revolution in 2019, they were able to take down a 30-year dictatorship. Al-Bashir regime was overthrown in 2019, but people start to become hopeful, right? And think that they finally going to get their democratic, civilian-led government. But that was cut short by the military and the Janjaweed, the two generals who were part of the previous regime and were trained by al-Bashir, and they were the reason for the genocide in Darfur and Nubian Mountain and South Sudan. They jumped and forced the revolutionists to accept them as a partner. And at that time, everybody here outside of Sudan were refusing and questioning this partnership. But they didn't have another option, because when you are faced with a gun and you're barehanded, you are going to try to accept whatever they give you. So that relationship or partnership between the Janjaweed, the military, and the revolutionists was supposed to take 4 years, and they were supposed to do a transitional government and give it back to the people. Of course, they don't want to give up the power, so a military coup happened. The revolution and the civilian-led government only lived for a short period of time. So the past, or the history, was repeating itself. A coup, and then after that, when people refused to accept the coup as the government, the war erupted. The current war started in April 15 of 2023. It is going to be a year now. And it started in a highly dense area. And out of 45 million, Sudan has 45 million people living there. More than 8 million people currently are refugees in neighboring country or displaced in states that are supposed to be somehow safer. But yet again, their houses were bombed, people were taken ransom. There is actual markets in the Darfur region where they sell people that they kidnap, or they call it, they give it a cute name like enforced disappearance. Enforced disappearance is real, but in Sudan it is not this enforced disappearance. You are sold or you're killed and no one will know where you're at. So out of the 45 million, 8 are displaced, but almost all of the remaining people who live there are in need of humanitarian assistance. During this war, we witnessed extrajudicial killing, indiscriminate shelling of private and public areas, unlawful detentions, and risking the life of activists and human rights and NGO, which led to people removing their staff. Because at the end of the day, you are responsible for their safety. So most of the organization withdrew their people from Sudan, which put the people in more risk, not just for their safety, because when you have people watching, they tend to behave a little bit better. Now there's no one there, right? But on top of that, you can't even get resources or help there because there is no safe place for you to go. There is currently over 19 million children who are not just out of school, but malnourished. In a refugee camp called Zamzam, there is a child died every 2 hours in that camp. And you don't hear this in the news, you don't hear it anywhere. But in some part, the currency, of course, is going to take a toll, the economy. But when you are faced with losing your life, economy, unemployment, all of that take like a step back, right? Humanitarian assistance is very, it's lacking, and it's not easy to deliver it because of the insecurity happening right now. And the ongoing crisis in Sudan, it is currently considered the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. But yet again, I am sure many of you don't know what is happening in Sudan, but it's considered one of the worst humanitarian crises. We were, and still are made to believe, even the women that lived during the revolution, they made up 60% of the protesters. And they're the one facing the harsher punishment. Because the whole area was made to believe that women's right or women's health, the lack of that, it is not a human right issue. You don't hear anyone talking about the human right violation or the rape or the sexual abuse that is happening currently to women in Sudan. Their domestic violence increasing. There's so many factors that are affecting women there. But again, when you are facing death or your rights, you are going to choose safety first, right? So the use of intimidation, torture, rape continue even to today. And it's a pattern, it's not something new. The government way of preventing women from speaking out, even taking pictures or sending videos. There is a cut of communication now. There is no way for anyone from Sudan to call or to receive a call or to even submit the violation. People were recording everything happening, submit it to news media or send it to their family who are on return. They pressure their elected official or they try to raise awareness. This cannot be possible now because of a complete cut of any type of communication. And this is all happening under our eyes. And yet, we are not doing anything, or we're not doing enough. But I'm just going to touch on some of the issues that are challenges specifically facing Sudan with the health inequity in Sudan, particularly affecting women. It's not a new issue, it's a long-standing issue, but with what is happening now when we talk about rape, we're talking about women who are lacking resources to prevent sexually transmitted diseases or unwanted pregnancy from rape. There is no place to go. All the hospitals are bombed. And when I say all, at some point it was 70%. Now there is no functioning hospital in Khartoum or any area. The situation in Khartoum is multiplied in the Darfur region or any other region because of the same reason. They can do whatever they want. Maternal mortality rates remain high, not just because of the limited access to skilled birth attendants and essential maternal care, but most of the people are not able to even eat a healthy meal or protect your health. The situation in Sudan increased the risk for women and girls to get help they needed. That is out of the question. Rape victims were deprived from getting any assistance. And we're not talking about mental health, we're talking about just the basic physical assistance that they can receive from a doctor. Mental health is affected by the stigma and the culture. So with the trauma, I lived during the time when the government would just start to torture people and to threaten with rape and detain you for a month. But for women, I was allowed to go back home and sleep at my own bed, but I have to be at the detention center at 5 a.m. And I get up in the morning at 15 years old, get dressed, you brush your teeth, and you go. And you sit there until they tell you to go home, right? After we left, they start to be more comfortable, and then they start to introduce the rape or any kind of torture. And the situation is getting worse day by day. The cultural factors and the tradition, because of the society is looking at a woman who is raped not as a victim. They look at you as someone who's not pure, and it's your fault and your mistake, and that's why it is heavily used during war, and especially in that region. Cultural factors and traditions that made women to accept any kind of treatment they get, such as female genital mutilation or early marriage, and limited decision-making power for women. All of this can contribute to the health inequity, including the lack of family planning, including education about reproductive health or knowing about how you can act in those type of situations. Those traditions did not just happen during the war. They kept alive by any means necessary. And unfortunately, even women kept those cycles alive to avoid the societal pressure and the fear of being rejected by the community. So that's why we will see even the well-educated women, not just someone who that's all they know. Some people have higher education, but they still practice the same tradition for the fear of being shunned from the society. When you hear, and I say this a lot, when you hear something a lot, you start to believe it is normal. You start to develop an understanding when you hear someone is telling you this is how things are supposed to go. You hear it long enough, you start to believe it is normal, and it becomes part of your learned behavior. I'm sure all of you heard the expression, hurt people, hurt people. I have or had first-hand experience with this cycle of abuse. I will just take you back a little bit to me at 5 years old. My vivid memory, and excuse me because you heard this earlier too, is looking at my mom and my grandmother's eyes while a third woman was holding my legs open to perform female genital mutilation. That day, I didn't just lose part of my body, but I lost trust of the people that were supposed to keep me safe, the people that I loved. And for the longest, I was questioning, why did they do this to me? Kept bothering me, keep coming back, until I got a little bit older and learned or realized that women were taught from an early age that they are groomed to live a domesticated life. They are trained to do house chores. They're not allowed to think of their own. And when you don't have something, you're not going to feel it's missing. You're not going to miss something that you never had, right? So most of them grew up having their life violated or have this happen to them, and they just kept the cycle going because that's what they were taught or what the society considered as normal. So when I got a little bit older, I learned that this has happened to mostly every woman in Sudan and in neighboring country, and it was targeted to make women feel that they don't have control over their body. That's the first thing. Second is to teach you to be obedient, and you don't have to talk about anything. So when you know that you don't have control over your own body, you're not going to try to have control over anything else. I learned during my research and trying to make it make sense that not just the societal pressure, but everything that my mom or my grandma were taught and happened to them, they just kept repeating it. So they were a victim themselves, and they continue to keep victimizing the next generation. And I would have become another statistics for everything that was happening in Sudan, except the fact that I had a good father. I had a liberal family that really taught me or tried to teach me that anything that my brothers can do, I can do, but at the same time, they do align to some traditions. Like they were good at some area, but there's some area that they had to follow what the society is teaching them to do. So with that, I went back and I talked to my mom, and one of the things that she shared with me, she was illiterate, by the way. She didn't get to go to school except for one day. She said her first day in school, that was her last day. Because when she came back home, she was very excited and made the mistake of telling her father that she wants to be like the teacher, her teacher that taught her. And his response that a woman places at home, cooking, cleaning, and taking care of the kids. He took her out of school that same day. So she was groomed from that early age until the age of 13 to be a wife. When she became a child bride at the age of 13, then she ended up having 10 kids. But she made it her mission, even though she was victimized and even though she tried to break that cycle, she made sure that we all went to school and we all learned and got the education that we need, and to not feel that we are different than anybody else. But when we sit in a place and you don't know anything other than your surrounding, you are not going to see that as different. The only reason we got to know and experience this is my older brother he traveled a lot, and that broadened his horizon, and in return, he brought back books, and he started to talk to us, so it broadened our horizon without leaving home. That's why you often hear me saying that travel or education is a cure for ignorance, because when we learn, we will know what to do and how to act. And throughout history, dictatorship survives on keeping people in the dark, and especially women. I'm a firm believer that education is the key to all our solutions, or our problems, a solution to all our problems. And you don't have to go far. Like even here in Pennsylvania, you can look around and talk to people around you and get to know where they come from and what culture they experience. But the most thing that I want you to just get out of this is Sudan is a country that is plagued by civil war and genocide. Just think of from 1956, 11 years of being not continuous. Throughout this history, the dark history, and what I just shared with you is nothing compared to the actual reality of what especially women face there. But throughout this, and despite of everything that was happening to them, they remained resilient, and they were in the front lines when the revolution happened. They were the one that holding things and played vital roles in making a difference and trying to change. So they were an instrumental part. Then when we got to the point of decision making, they were underlined, of course. And that all doesn't matter right now because the war is taking everything. It's reverting the country back to, I don't even know what year we can refer to. During the negotiation, when the war like happening right now, they start to do negotiation with the two generals, which they both of them refuse to listen to logic or stop the war. And when you destroy the whole country and you kill almost 8 million people, who are you going to be the governor or the president to? It just doesn't make sense what they do there. The situation in Sudan currently and now during the war is dire. And it is not just in Sudan, but whatever happening there, it mirrors the global way that we are treating not just women, but the way we're going right now. If you look around you, there is a war in Ukraine, and there's a war in Palestine, and different part of Congo, different areas that you might not even hear about, and it's all by design. So what we can do, right? What can we do? At some point, I lost hope. I continue to speak, and I continue to try to do my part and do my best to raise awareness. But at some point, when you don't see anything happening, and you see a different reaction to different scenarios, you lose hope in humanity. But we can't allow that to happen. We don't have that luxury. We have the luxury of turning off, hearing the news, right? But the people who are currently suffering and facing war, they don't have that ability to turn off the gun or the bombing or the rape, or not knowing that if you open your door, you might get killed or raped. One of the two. Like, those are the two options that you have. Everything that happened to me, I wrote the book because I use it as my coping mechanism. It wasn't meant for it to be a book or a memoir. Definitely that was not the reason, but it was a coping mechanism for me. But then I thought people need to know, because many times when I lay down and start to think about my life, and I'm here and safe now, right? But you think this is not true. Like, this cannot happen to one person. It doesn't sound right. It's not real. And you get to the point that you lose trust in God or anything that you believe in, and like, enough is enough. But during all of that, we can try to be hopeful, right? And try to find or see that light at the end of the tunnel. I don't see it some days, and with my struggles, it did transform me. I can say it did transform me into who I am today. I carry the trauma, I carry everything that I've been through, but at the end of the day, I look and I see it as I am still lucky. I'm able to survive. I have a good life. I got a job. I'm able to go to my bed and sleep. Other people cannot. But my privilege is the same as your privilege. I used to question myself and say, what privilege do I have as a Black immigrant woman? But I thought I have a loud voice. So I start to use that, and I start to share my experiences, and I start to talk to people and finding a way to help and put a face. So when you go home and you start to think about your life or anything in the world, you are going to remember that some people look like the person you saw today are facing injustice. And that shouldn't be the only reason for us to care or try to do something. We don't have to experience trauma. You don't have to go through anything that I went through, or any woman in Sudan or Ukraine or anywhere that where there is injustice to care. We simply need to care because we're human. And we need to find what we can do to help. Whether that putting a hashtag and raising awareness, talking about it, or writing to an official, or just have that uncomfortable conversation with your family member. And that doesn't have to be just about war or Sudan. It could be with any issue that we have here. We have plenty of issues that we can take care of. And when we talk about women and what they're facing, any woman here can relate to some part of any woman in Sudan or anywhere in the world. It looks the same, the injustice, the systemic racism. It just have a different name and a different look to it. When Martin Luther King, there's one quote that he said, and we really need to listen to it and take it to the last word of it. Injustice anywhere is the threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny, and whatever affects one directly, it affects all indirectly. If we all understand this part, we will know that, yes, you should care, not because it's affecting you, because you're human, but also care because it could happen to you. It could happen here. And when you are in need, you want someone to stand in solidarity with you, and you want someone to amplify your voice, or put a hand out to try to help you. There is a lot that I can share with you, and I had the pleasure of talking to some of the students and talking to other people about more details and more issues that are happening and statistics, and we can continue all night. It will take a couple of days for you to hear it, but I really would like for you to learn more about Sudan, or learn more about anywhere that needs our help. I will stop right here and see if you guys have any questions. I am happy to answer them for you.
All right. At this point, we are going to start our question and answer session. Because this program tonight is being live streamed and recorded, we ask that you please raise your hand and wait for a microphone to reach you before asking your question. We reserve the first question for a student, and then we will open it up to the rest of the audience. So, at this point, we're looking for our first question.
Firstly, I want to thank you for sharing your experience. Like, you talk about how your brother traveled around the world and bring back school for you. I just want to ask, what did you learn about, through those books?
I read a lot of, I learned about not just Martin Luther King. Like here, when I start to see the curriculums here, I learned that our kids are not going to learn what they need. In Sudan, even though they were the war and everything, but we were culturally oriented, and geography. So in Sudan, I knew Pennsylvania, and I knew a lot of history about the U.S. But the books, he will bring back books about Nelson Mandela. I read about Martin Luther King. I read about Rosa Parks. I read about the Civil War here, and also Gabriel Garcia Marquez. You know, I learned about the revolution in Cuba. That's in an early age, and small light treat. So I know this is all heavy, but most of it is, it makes you think that you're not alone. And that's mostly why I share my story, because someone somewhere experienced similar situation. And the feeling that you're not alone, it gives you a community that you might not have. So don't underestimate the strengths that you can provide to someone by sharing your story or just being kind. So knowing that people suffer and they found a way out, that was for me that light at the end of the tunnel. There is a poem, listen to Bob Marley. I had a big poster of Bob Marley, and you know, a lot of singers, Whitney Houston. Like, if I ask you a singer from Sudan, you're not gonna know, but we did learn a lot. I knew the pop culture, I knew country music. I loved Reba back in Sudan when I was like 15 or 20 years. But this is the one of an examples of why knowledge is power and why education is important.
Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us tonight. I think my question is, you spoke about how your father kind of opened the avenues for you to pursue the things you wanted to, be able to advocate in your country. But were there any other female activists that you look up to and inspired to be like, or was that mostly you kind of trailblazing?
No, not me. I thought all women looked like my mom and acted like my mom until during the small period of democracy that Sudan had in 1985. My family are activists, all of them, so in our house or front yard, they were holding something similar to this. And they had speakers from different parties that are going to run for an election before the coup happened, right? And I was 8 years old, and I was sitting in the front, and a lady walked. She was running to be a president. I didn't know that could happen, right? She was wearing a beautiful white toque. It's a Sudanese tradition. Her name was Fatima Ahmed Ibrahim. She was a true trailblazer. I didn't understand what she was saying. I was sitting there listening to her. Everyone was silent and mesmerized. And I remember that day, I said, I want to be like her. I don't know why. I didn't understand that she's a, woman rights activist and she's doing all of that. But she was talking, people were listening, clapping their hand. Her demeanor, the way she stood, she did not look like my mom. So she became my idol, right? And I started to listen from that day and to know that women can be more than cooking and cleaning and just doing house chores. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but for it to be the only thing that you're allowed to do, that was everything that I know. She broke that. And after that, I got to learn many other female role models. Fatima was the first female in the parliament in Africa, not just Sudan. And knowing that later on, made me appreciate her more. The things that she did, she paved the road for all of us. They had to face. Can you imagine being the first woman doing anything in a country that doesn't allow you to do anything, basically? So, yeah. And Winnie Mandela, by the way, Nelson's wife also.
you again. For decades now, activists in Sudan and Egypt and other neighbouring countries have been fighting against FGM, and there's transnational solidarity about that in feminist networks and aid agencies and all sorts. Has it got anywhere? Has it made any difference?
Let me take that back. It did and it didn't. It made a difference for the people who left Sudan, let's just put it this way, or in Egypt. Most women, and I shared that with your student earlier, some women were not exposed to female genital mutilation, and they got older, and before they got married, they gave in to the pressure around them, and they went and got that done as an adult, which is something that I don't understand. That just will show you how powerful society and pressure is for someone, an adult, to go and say, okay, abuse me, you know? It's not funny, but it makes you really rethink everything that you know. It is still happening, and I'm sad to tell you that it's happening here in the United States. In Minnesota, there is a few doctors in Minnesota that were facing jail and consequences. They were able to get away because they brought in religious and culture, where there's nothing in any religion talk about mutilation or female genital mutilation. But they made it sound as it is a religious thing. So people continue to do it, and unfortunately, they won that court, and they're allowed to do it. People do fly to states to get their kids, you know. I don't want to call it circumcision because that's mutilation, you know, it's not, yeah. But it's happening here in 2 states, and despite everything we're doing to fight it, it is still happening. And if you can't force people to do anything, that's why you need to educate people. And the amount of education we're doing, it is helping, but it's not helping enough. People in that region do it, and now they have to hide it. So it is done in an unsanitary, just like Roe v. Wade. It is going to put us back to the alley abortion, right? Same thing is happening now with using unsanitized equipment. So if it's going to happen, regulate it and have it under doctor or nurse practitioner. As much as I hate it being like continue happening, but I much rather have it happen safely until people are, you can't force them because they're going to do it.
Hi, I'm just wondering, we've talked about, I'm in an anthropology course, and one of the topics we talked about is the topic of female circumcision, and sort of the debate whether it's genital mutilation, how it's considered across different cultures. And I'm just curious what your opinion is on the idea that some of the interviews that we looked at in that course made it appear as though women sort of viewed it as part of the process of becoming a woman, like something like to them according to like similar to like having a bat mitzvah or something along the lines of like it's a process of how to become a grown woman versus being a younger girl.
You're talking about the female genital mutilation being part of like tradition. Is that your question? It is not viewed as that. It is not a religious or basically being a woman, because it's done when it happened to me. I was 5 years old. You're not near being in puberty or an adult. You don't know anything, right? So it's happening because of, like I said, grooming women and making them believe that the only way that you are going to get married and be accepted into the society is being pure. So the word purity, or to save the honor of the family. So it is all about sexualizing women and making them, reducing your existence and everything that you are to your body. And even with your body, to being a vehicle or someone's pleasure, not for your well-being. There is a lot of health risk to female genital mutilation, as you know, not just during childbirth or a relationship or anything, but even in a monthly, when you get your period, when you go see the doctor, we're talking about the physical action, physical manifestation that you will see, not just the mental, right? It is not used as something part of the tradition, it's used as a control method. Does that make sense?
We have time for 2 more questions.
I don't know if I need the mic. Thank you for being here and for everything you shared. And thank you for coming to my class. You know, we talked about the war, we talked about your presence here in the US, and I want to ask you about your double identity as Afro and Arab woman, and how do you position yourself in terms of these double identities, and how does the US see that? You know, 'cause I see you different, right? I come from the same region you come from, so we understand each other. But I'm wondering, what do people, do they see you just as an African woman? How do you navigate the world in the US as an Afro-Arab?
So, if you have a minute, I'm just going to share with you when I was a refugee, when I was helped by the UN and became a refugee in Egypt before I got settled here in the US, I thought that everything is going to get better. Mostly every refugee think that when they find their permanent home or final safe place that they're going to get to, that all their troubles are going to disappear, right? And then you see the harsh reality. I came and I found myself trying to prove myself again. And that's not just for an immigrant person or basically any minority woman. You will find yourself have to work 10 times harder than anybody else. You are always in a fight or flight mood, trying to prove yourself. Not trying to prove you're good, you're trying to prove that you're not bad. So it doesn't matter what you do, you still get that question. At the beginning it was very hard, not just to understand the culture or to navigate or start, but you come here with no knowledge. This is a new experience for you. You're starting from zero. And then you find push. And I believe I shared with your student earlier that you are questioned and you are asked, and I personally was asked, am I here to take their job, right? And at that time I was working at the daycare and a housekeeper at the hospital. So which job are you talking about? I'm thinking, right? And going to school at the same time. I was asked question if that, are you sure you're from Africa? Because you don't look like African. I'm like, what African look like? And if you get all those kind of questions, it's, your hair is real, are you, you lived with animals? Like those questions truly happened to me when I came here. I was like, a shock. You feel, okay, this is ignorance or this is just lack of information. And that's where you start to draw the line. But people up to today will question when you come in and say, okay, I have a company, I'm running a nursing staffing company. Oh, okay. How did you, it's a shock. So you get that, but also you get the people that who listen to you and hear you and try to see beyond your color or your sex or whatever you represent. That is still happening, and that's something that we need to do a lot of work. Well, everywhere. Let me tell you, I've been to so many states, and it's the same. And this is not just here in the U.S., but anywhere. It's a human nature. Anyone will tell you that they don't have, they're not racist. They're lying to you. We all have some form of prejudice somewhere, or you look at someone and you make a remark, and you might think, oh, that's not me, that's not racism, that's just me. And I said joking after it, so it should be okay, right? No, that's we need a lot of work. We need to teach people not just cultural sensitivity, and diversity, equity, and inclusion cannot just be a title. We need to actually care, and we need to provide that, right? And what I always say to my girls is, don't judge. Like when we talk about bullying or talking about just saying mean things, right? You don't know what that person came from, what type of life they grew up in, what trauma they saw. So their way of acting, if it doesn't look right to you, don't jump and judge them and jump to conclusion. Try to see. Most people who came from different places or part of the world and they're here with you, they run from something. Normally people don't leave home. There's a poem, give me my phone. I don't think if we have time, but there's a poem by Warsan Shire called Home. I did my own version of that. I'm not going to read it to you, but I'll send it to your teacher. The poem called Home, and it really talks about our experience from fleeing the country and why anyone will leave their home. So just keep that in mind when you deal with refugees or someone from a different background. Know that they have something in their life. They might face trauma that you don't know about. And that's the same with anything or anyone. My troubles might be too much, right, for someone, but your problem could be just like your hair didn't work today, and that's okay. That's a big problem for you, and I need to appreciate that, understand it, and treat it as an issue if it's affecting you, right? So just if we use this and like copy it with everything we do, life will be better. But read that poem. My version of it, it's not done. I'm still working on it, but mainly it talk about my journey and just to allow people to see from a refugee, standpoint. No one leave home unless home breathe despair, right? And no one will leave everything that they have, their memory, their church memory, their friends, their family, everything that they know. No one leave the unknown, the known for the unknown, right? So if we keep that in mind and know that people do things because they have to sometimes, and sometimes we have to just do what we need to do to survive. I will share the poem with you, and you can share it.
We have one last question.
Hi. First of all, thank you again for coming and talking to us.
Thank you.
Kind of going off of what you said earlier about the parallels between the overturning of Roe versus Wade and unsafe female genital mutilation. Are there any other parallels, either like institutionally or even just in a micro-aggressive way that you've seen in America and Sudan or any other place that you have experience with?
Yeah, a lot. Let's start with, we put the rape victim. The same mentality. When I came here, I thought people are going to think of women and treat women differently because we should know better, right? But yet you will see the sexualizing. Even when why do I need a naked woman in my car or a cup of coffee, like with the commercial I'm talking about, right? So over-sexualizing women and putting them in a position where we're basically desensitizing young generation to look at women and view them as subjects. not as human. And that's you see, even when we talk about maternity leave, right? We had a huge fight trying to pass a policy on having women not being punished for bringing life. As you know, you're the president or you're the senator, but you're someone's son. She brought you to life, right? So having rights, having ability to not be turned down for a job because you might be sick or have your period, right? Not be able to perform as the way that they thought you would perform. Wages, the gap between women and men, it still exists here to today. If you do a research, you'll find women, and then with women, you will see minority women, the pay gap, the raise, the treatment. There's one thing that I personally experienced in Sudan and many young people, when you're walking, it's okay for anyone to harass you, men especially, to call you name, touch you, do all of that. That is happening here also in the workplace. And when women talk about their sexual harassment, they are called names or talk about it in a way that prevent other women from coming out and saying they're victims. Domestic violence was another thing that really blew my mind. I survived the torture and I came here, brought my ex-husband with me, the father of both of my girls, right? And he started to drink heavily, became abusive, and it got to the point that I almost lost my life. That's when I said enough is enough, and not because of that, because I was 8 months pregnant and he was on top of me, choking the life out of me. My 6-year-old woke up and she was in the hallway looking at me. I was on the floor and I looked up. I stayed in that situation for 4 years because my family told me that I need to stay with that man, to give him another chance. Maybe he was drunk, maybe it's a mistake. You don't want your kids to grow up without a father. You hear that, and when I start to talk about the domestic violence, I was told, don't air your dirty laundry. You can't talk like that. No one else is going to marry you. Right? You hear all of that, not just in the back of your head, but you hear it, you read it, the messages, all of that. The moment that I looked up and I saw my 6-year-old is looking at me and I saw the horror in her eyes, I realized, am I going to continue this cycle? I am going to be another statistic. She's going to be another statistic, thinking it's okay, right? And I thought this is just a Middle Eastern thing, right? No, domestic violence is well analyzed here too. That's why I started Tomorrow Smile, a non-profit organization, because it's easier to relate to someone who lived through the experience. So when I consult survivors and thrivers, when you talk to them, they can see that it is not easy said than done, because it is done. It can be, like it could happen to them, right? So that's one of the privilege I'm talking about. Use the bad things that happen to you to shed lights on the ugliness that is happening, or to be the guide and the light for someone. But domestic violence surprised me, that amount of violence happening here, and the lack of accountability. Yes, there is some form, but I've been doing this since 2015, since I started Tomorrow Smiles, and the numbers of cases that I get is unbelievable. And the reaction is the same thing, that their family asked them to stay. They didn't want to leave because they were worried. Someone gonna view you differently because you're a divorced woman, that you're a savage. You're not good. They like to basically always put in a place that you are a subject, not a human being. There's a lot, like so many similarities, unfortunately. And this is 2024. We're still talking about minimum wages and fair payment for women, maternity leave. the Trump era, we are facing, going back to no one is going to be punished for saying a racist remark. Also, no one is going to get punished for sexually harassing or touching. If you see your president talking about groping someone or doing something and getting away with it. So we're not setting a good example, let me just say that. It mirrors global way of thinking, not just in Sudan. Hopefully that answered your question.
And with that, that's going to conclude tonight's program. Just a reminder that there will be a book sale and signing in the lobby tonight if you're interested. But please join me in thanking our